my mother kept a notebook, a brown cloth covered composition notebook, the kind you buy in a drugstore for $1.49. She carried it in her purse for 11 years. I thought it was a prayer journal. It wasn't. My name is Renata Voss. I am 38 years old. And if you found this channel, you probably already know that the people who smile the widest at family dinners are sometimes the ones keeping the most careful records against you. Welcome. Sit down. This one takes a while to tell. I want to start on a Tuesday. Not the Tuesday everything ended, that comes later, but a specific Tuesday in March of 2022. At approximately 7:14 p.m., when I was standing in the parking structure of the Riverside County Courthouse on Main Street in Riverside, California, holding a manila envelope that had just been handed to me by a paralegal named Deb Ochoa. The envelope was sealed with a strip of packing tape. It was warm from being inside her bag. My hands were cold. I remember that contrast specifically, the warmth of the envelope against my cold fingers, because it was the last moment before I knew everything. Inside that envelope was a document titled Petition for Conservatorship of the Estate of Renata Marie Voss, filed the 9th of December 2021, signed by my mother Karen Voss, co-signed by my brother Marcus Voss, supported by a letter from a psychiatrist named Dr. Elliot Crane, whose office I had visited exactly once in October of 2021 at my mother's insistence, for what she described as a routine wellness check after everything you've been through. I had not been through anything. I had just turned 36. I had just paid off my car. I had just been promoted to senior compliance analyst at a regional credit union in San Bernardino. I was, by every measurable standard, fine, but someone had decided I wasn't. And they had been building the paperwork to prove it for at least 40 months before I found out. Stay with me, because the notebook, that brown composition notebook, my mother carried for 11 years, is the thing that explains all of it. And I'll get there. But first, you need to understand who Carolyn Voss is and how she operates, and why it took me 36 years to see it clearly. My mother is not a villain in the way people imagine villains. She doesn't yell. She doesn't slam doors. She doesn't call you names or throw things. She is, in fact, extraordinarily calm. She speaks in a measured, slightly sorrowful tone that makes everything she says sound like a diagnosis. When she tells you something is wrong with you, she says it the way a doctor tells you about a blood test result, with a kind of practiced, regretful certainty, as if she wishes it weren't true, but has an obligation to be honest. She is 64 years old. She retired early from a career as a medical billing coordinator at a hospital system in the Inland Empire. She has a gift for documentation. She has a gift for system. She has a gift for making other people feel like they are the problem in any room she enters. I grew up in a house in Fontana, California, on a street called Oleander Drive. The house had a detached garage that my father converted into a workshop before he left in 1997, when I was 11 and Marcus was 8. After my father left, my mother reorganized the workshop into what she called her office. She put a filing cabinet in there. She put a desk. She put a label maker on the desk. And she began with the quiet dedication of someone who has found her true calling to organize the family's life into folders. There was a folder for Marcus's school records, a folder for mine, a folder for medical expenses, a folder for what she called incidents, a word I didn't fully understand until I was much older. The incidents folder was where she kept written records of things that had gone wrong, not accidents, not emergencies, behavioral incidents. My behavior incidents, dated, described in 2 to 3 sentences, and filed in chronological order. I know this because I found the folder when I was 15. I was looking for a copy of my immunization records. For a school trip, I opened the wrong drawer. The folder was labeled in her careful label maker font, Renata Behavioral Concerns, ongoing. I opened it. There were 47 pages inside. The earliest entry was dated the 14th of September, 1993. I was 7 years old. The entry read, Renata refused to finish dinner, became upset when asked to sit back down, threw a spoon, possible, impulse, control issue, monitor. I had been 7. I had thrown a spoon, and my mother had written it down, dated it, and filed it under behavioral concerns ongoing. If you've ever had the experience of discovering that someone has been building a case against you since before you were old enough to understand what a case was, you know exactly what I mean when I say that finding that folder didn't make me angry. It made me very, very quiet. It made me feel like the floor had shifted slightly to the left and would never quite shift back. I put the folder back. I found my immunization records. I went on the school trip. I never told anyone what I'd seen. That was my first mistake. The second thing you need to understand is Marcus. Marcus is 35. He works in property management. He has my mother's calm, my mother's measured tone, and my mother's gift for making you feel like you are the one being unreasonable. He and I were close when we were children, genuinely close, the way siblings are when they're surviving the same household together. We built forts in the backyard. We watched the same movies. We had a language of small jokes that only we understood. That closeness started to erode around the time Marcus turned 22 and moved back home after 2 years at a community college. I didn't understand why it was eroding. I thought it was just distance. I had moved to San Bernardino by then. I was working, I was building a life. I thought we were just growing apart the way siblings sometimes do. I understand now that it wasn't distant, it was realignment. Marcus had chosen a side, and the side he chose came with benefits. A rent-free apartment in a property my mother owned on Citrus Avenue, a monthly loan that was never repaid and never formally recorded, and the quiet, ongoing reassurance that he was the good one, the stable one, the one she didn't have to worry about, the one she didn't have to worry about. That phrase is important. Hold on to it. The first time I noticed something was specifically wrong, not just emotionally off, but structurally wrong, was in January of 2020 at my mother's 62nd birthday dinner. She had organized it herself, as she organized everything at a restaurant called the Orchard House in Redlands. She had made a reservation for 7 people. She had assigned seating. She had prepared, and I am not exaggerating, a printed agenda for the dinner, which she placed at each setting on a small card. The agenda listed the arrival time, the order in which toast would be given, and a line at the bottom that read, Brief Family Update, Carolyn. I remember looking at that card and feeling the specific unease of someone who has just noticed that a room they thought was familiar has a door they've never seen before. The brief family update lasted 22 minutes. My mother spoke about her retirement plans, about a property she was considering selling, and about what she called some concerns. I've been discussing with Dr. Crane regarding Renata's long-term well-being. She said this in front of 5 other family members. She said it in the same measured, sorrowful tone she used for everything. She said it as if she were doing me a kindness by saying it out loud. I said, What concerns? She said, We don't need to get into it tonight, sweetheart. This is a celebration. And she moved on to the next item on the agenda. I sat there with my water glass in my hand, and I did not say anything else. Not because I had nothing to say, because I understood in that moment that anything I said would be filed, dated, described in 2 to 3 sentences, added to a folder. That detail matters later. Remember the dinner card. I want to tell you about Deb Ochoa now, because she is the reason I know any of this. Deb was not a close friend. She was not someone I had known for years. She was the paralegal at a family law firm in Riverside that I had contacted in February of 2022 after a conversation with my cousin Sylvia had left me with the specific cold feeling that something legal was happening around me without my knowledge. Sylvia had mentioned in passing that she'd been asked some questions by someone she described as a doctor or a lawyer. I am not sure which about my mental health history. She said it casually. The way you mention something, you assume the other person already knows. I did not already know. I called the firm the next morning. I spoke to a paralegal named Deb Ochoa, who had a flat, efficient voice and the manner of someone who has heard every version of every family story and is not surprised by any of them. She asked me a series of questions. She told me she would do some preliminary research. She called me back 4 days later and said, "You need to come in. There is a filing." That was all she said. There is a filing. I drove to Riverside on a Tuesday. I parked in the courthouse parking structure on Main Street. I sat in my car for 6 minutes before I went inside. I remember looking at my hands on the steering wheel and thinking that they looked like someone else's hands. Deb met me in the lobby. She handed me the envelope. She said, "Read it before we talk. Take as long as you need." I read it in a conference room with a window that looked out onto a parking lot. It took me 11 minutes. When I finished, I set the document down on the table and I looked out the window at the parking lot for a long time. I did not cry in that conference room. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry until later, alone in my car in the parking structure, with the engine running and the heat on because it was cold for March. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, and then I stopped and I drove home and I did not cry again. That is the only time I cried. I want you to know that the petition was 31 pages long. It had been filed on the 9th of December, 2021, in Riverside County Superior Court. The petitioner was listed as Carolyn Ann Voss. The co-petitioner was Marcus David Voss. The subject of the petition, the person whose estate they were seeking to control, was me. The grounds cited were, and I am reading directly from the document now, subject demonstrates a pattern of financial mismanagement, social isolation, emotional dysregulation, and impaired judgment, consistent with a mental health condition requiring supervised estate management. Financial mismanagement, social isolation, emotional dysregulation, impaired judgment. Let me tell you what my finances look like on the 9th of December, 2021, the day my mother filed that petition. I had $14,300 in a savings account at Pacific Premier Bank. I had a checking account with a balance of $4,812. I had a 401k through my employer with a vested balance of $22,600. I had no credit card. I had no outstanding loans. My car was paid off. I had been promoted to senior compliance analyst 8 months earlier at a salary of $67,200 annually. I was, by every financial metric, stable, more than stable. I was careful. I was a kind of person who kept receipts, but the petition didn't cite my bank statements. It cited Dr. Elliot Crane's letter. And Dr. Crane's letter, which I had never seen, which I had never been told existed, described me as exhibiting significant anxiety, difficulty maintaining interpersonal relationships, and a pattern of distorted thinking that may impair her ability to manage her affairs independently. I had met Dr. Crane once on the 14th of October, 2021, for 50 minutes at my mother's request for what she had described as a routine wellness check. I had answered his questions honestly. I had told him I sometimes felt anxious. I had told him I had ended a long-term relationship the previous year and was still adjusting. I had told him I sometimes found family gatherings stressful. He had written all of that down. And then he had used it to build a clinical portrait of a woman who could not be trusted to manage her own life. If you've ever sat in a room and answered questions honestly, and then discovered that your honesty was being used as evidence against you, you know exactly what I mean when I say that I did not feel betrayed by Dr. Crane. I felt something colder than betrayal. I felt the specific chill of understanding that the system had been designed before I walked into the room, that the outcome had been decided, that I was not a patient, I was a document. Deb Ochoa sat across from me in the conference room after I finished reading. She had a yellow legal pad and a pen. She did not offer me sympathy. She offered me something better. She said, "Tell me everything you know about your mother's financial relationship with your brother." I told her about the apartment on Citrus Avenue. I told her about the monthly loans. I told her that I had, over the years, been asked by my mother to contribute to various family expenses: my grandmother's medical bills in 2017, a roof repair on the Fontana house in 2019, a temporary shortfall in my mother's retirement account in 2020, and that I had contributed each time because she had asked and because I had believed her. Deb wrote everything down. She did not react. She said, "Do you have records of those transfers?" I said, "Yes." I kept records of everything. I had bank statements going back 7 years. I had the emails in which my mother had made each request. I had the amounts, the dates, the accounts. Deb looked up from her legal pad. She said, "Good, because I think what we're going to find is that this conservatorship isn't about your mental health. It is about your money." She said it the way you say something you already know to be true, but are waiting for the other person to catch up to. I caught up. Here is what the records showed. Once Deb and the attorney she worked with, a woman named Patricia Holt, who specialized in elder law and financial abuse cases, began pulling the threads. Between January of 2017 and November of 2021, I had transferred a total of $31,400 to my mother across 14 separate transactions. The amounts range from $800 to $4,200. Each transfer had been preceded by a phone call or an email in which my mother described a specific urgent need. Each transfer had been made from my Pacific Premier Bank checking account to an account my mother described as her household account. That account was not a household account. It was a joint account held by Carolyn Voss and Marcus David Voss. Every dollar I transferred went into an account that Marcus had equal access to. $31,400, 14 transactions, 57 months from January 2017 to November 2021. That is an average of $551 per month every month for nearly 5 years. I had not known Marcus was on that account. My mother had never mentioned it. The emails requesting the transfers referred only to my account, her need, her emergency. But there was more. Patricia Holt requested the account records through the legal process. And what came back was a document that I would describe to you carefully because I want you to understand exactly what it showed. The account had received deposits from 3 sources over those 57 months. My transfers. A monthly deposit from my mother's pension, which was $1,200 per month. And a third source, a series of transfers from an account registered to a property management company called Voss Holdings LLC, which was incorporated in California in March of 2018 and listed Marcus David Voss as the sole managing member. Voss Holdings LLC. My brother had a company that managed rental properties, a company that had been incorporated 3 months after my mother transferred the deed of the Citrus Avenue property, the property where Marcus lived rent-free, into the company's name. The property was valued at $340,000 at the time of the transfer. The transfer was recorded as a IFT for estate planning purposes. No money changed hands. My mother gave my brother a $340,000 property, recorded it as a gift, and then continued to ask me for money to cover her household expenses. I want to say that again, clearly. My mother gave my brother a property worth $340,000. And then she called me and asked me for $800 because the water heater needed replacing. Stay with me, because this is where the brown notebook comes back. Patricia Holt filed a response to the conservatorship petition on the 3rd of April, 2022. The response challenged the petition on procedural grounds, specifically that Dr. Crane's letter had been obtained without my informed consent, and that the clinical assessment it described did not meet the legal standard for conservatorship under California Probate Code Section 3100. She also filed a counter motion requesting full financial disclosure from both petitioners. My mother's response to the counter motion was to request a mediation session. She called me the evening after the filing. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice on the voicemail was exactly as it always was, measured, slightly sorrowful, as if she were the one who had been hurt. She said, "Renata, I think there has been a misunderstanding. I've only ever wanted to protect you. I hope we can talk about this as a family." I saved the voicemail. I sent it to Patricia Holt. Patricia Holt said, "Good. The mediation was scheduled for May 17, 2022 at a mediator's office in downtown Riverside. I arrived at 9 a.m. My mother arrived at 9:07 a.m. Marcus arrived at 9:12 a.m. They were together. They had driven together. My mother was wearing a gray cardigan and carrying her purse. The brown composition notebook was in her purse. I could see the corner of it. The mediator was a man named Gerald Whitfield, who had the careful, neutral manner of someone professionally trained to have no opinions. He explained the process. He asked each party to speak without interruption. He began with my mother. My mother spoke for 40 minutes. She described in her measured, sorrowful tone a daughter who had struggled for years with anxiety and poor decision-making. She described the October 2021 appointment with Dr. Crane as something she had arranged out of love and concern. She described the conservatorship petition as a last resort after years of watching Renata make choices that worried the whole family. She did not mention the $31,400. She did not mention Voss Holdings, LLC. She did not mention the Citrus Avenue property. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with an expression of such practiced, genuine seeming sorrow that I understood, fully and finally, that she had been rehearsing this moment for years. That the notebook, the folder, the dinner agenda, the Dr. Crane appointment, all of it had been preparation for exactly this room, this table, this expression. She had been building toward this for a very long time, and she had expected me to walk in unprepared. I want to tell you about the notebook now, the full story of the notebook. During the discovery process, the legal process by which both sides exchanged documents, Patricia Holt requested all records. My mother had kept relating to me. My mother's attorney, a man named Robert Fielding, submitted a box of documents. In that box was the brown composition notebook. It was 112 pages long. It covered the period from September of 2011, when I was 25, to October of 2021, the month of the Dr. Crane appointment. 11 years. 112 pages. The notebook was organized by year. Each year had a section. Each section contained dated entries describing my behavior, my statements, my concerning patterns. The entries were written in my mother's careful, even handwriting. They were factual in tone. They read like clinical notes. Some entries were mundane. The 4th of March, 2014. Renata declined to attend Easter dinner, said she was tired, possible avoidance behavior. Some were more pointed. The 19th of August, 2017, Renata questioned the amount of the water heater transfer, became defensive when I explained the urgency, possible financial anxiety. Some were almost surreal in their precision. The 14th of October, 2021, Renata attended appointment with Dr. Crane as requested, appeared cooperative. Dr. Crane confirmed concerns in subsequent call. Proceeding. She wrote proceeding after the Dr. Crane appointment, as if it were a project milestone, as if I were a task on a checklist. 112 pages, 11 years. My mother had been keeping clinical notes on me since I was 25 years old, in a brown composition notebook that she carried in her purse, that I had seen 100 times and never questioned, that I had thought was a prayer journal. If you've ever had the experience of realizing that something ordinary, something you've seen 1,000 times, something you associated with comfort or familiarity, was actually a weapon pointed at you. You know exactly what I mean when I say that the notebook changed the texture of my entire memory. Every family dinner, every phone call, every holiday, I went back through all of it and saw the notebook in her purse. And I understood that she had been writing things down, that she had been building, that the whole time I thought I was living my life, she had been documenting it. Patricia Holt used the notebook as evidence, not against my mother. The notebook itself wasn't illegal, but it was useful. It was useful because it showed the jury, and by jury I mean the judge, because this was a civil proceeding, that the conservatorship petition was not a spontaneous act of concern. It was the culmination of an 11-year project. The judge agreed. On the 8th of June 2022, the conservatorship petition was denied. The judge's written ruling stated that the petition lacks the evidentiary foundation required under California Probate Code and appears to have been motivated by factors unrelated to the subject's welfare. Motivated by factors unrelated to the subject's welfare. That is judge language for this was never about helping her. I want to pause here and talk to you directly for a moment, because I think some of you watching this are in the middle of something similar and you're not sure yet what you are looking at. You are not crazy. The confusion you feel, the way you keep second guessing yourself, the way their version of events always seems slightly more coherent than yours, the way you feel like you are always one step behind in the conversation you didn't know was happening. That confusion is not a symptom of your instability. It is the product of a system that was designed to make you feel that way. It is working exactly as intended. The thing about people like my mother is that they are not impulsive. They are not reactive. They do not lose control. They plan. They document. They build. And they are very, very patient. They can afford to be patient because they are not the ones being eroded. You are. If you recognize this pattern, if you're sitting somewhere right now thinking about a notebook or a folder or a dinner agenda with a line at the bottom that made you feel cold, please, before you do anything else, find a Deb Ochoa. Find someone with a flat, efficient voice and a legal pad who will ask you the right question, because the paperwork exists. It always exists. You just need someone who knows how to find it. Drop a comment below if this resonates. I read every one. The financial abuse case was separate from the conservatorship proceeding. Patricia Holt referred it to a civil litigation attorney named James Okafor, who filed suits against Carolyn Voss and Marcus Voss in July of 2022. The suit alleged financial elder abuse, which is a specific legal category in California, though in this case it was inverted because I was the younger party, and fraudulent misrepresentation in the solicitation of the $31,400. The case settled in February of 2023. I cannot disclose the full terms of the settlement. What I can tell you is that I received a payment. I can tell you that the payment was more than $31,400. I can tell you that Marcus signed a document acknowledging that Voss Holdings LLC had received funds that originated from my transfers. I can tell you that my mother signed a document as well. I can also tell you that neither of them apologized, not in the settlement documents, not in any communication before or after. My mother sent me a card at Christmas of 2022. After the conservatorship was denied before the civil case settled, the card had a picture of a winter landscape on the front. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "I hope you know that everything I've done has been out of love for you. I hope someday you understand." I kept the card. I gave it to James Okafor. He added it to the file. I want to tell you about Sylvia now because she deserves more than a passing mention. Sylvia Reyes is my mother's niece, my first cousin on my mother's side. She is 42 years old. She lives in Pomona. She works as a high school librarian. She has a small house with a garden in the backyard where she grows tomatoes and peppers and a fig tree that she has been tending for 9 years. Sylvia is the one who told me about the questions she'd been asked. She did it casually over the phone in January of 2022 because she genuinely did not know it was significant. She thought I already knew. She thought it was something that had been discussed openly in the family. When I called her back, 2 days after I'd spoken to Deb Otterall and told her what I'd found, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want you to know that I told whoever it was that you were one of the most competent people I'd ever met. I told them that I want you to know I said that. I will remember that for the rest of my life." Not because it was dramatic, because it was specific. Because she didn't say, "I am so sorry," or "that is terrible," or "what can I do?" She told me exactly what she had said in the room when it mattered, before she knew it mattered. She had defended me without knowing she was defending me. She had told the truth about me to someone who was trying to build a lie about me. And she had done it without any strategic calculation, just because it was true. I will remember that for the rest of my life. Sylvia is the person I called when the conservatorship was denied. I called her from my car in the parking structure of the Riverside County Courthouse, the same parking structure where Deeb had handed me the envelope 14 months earlier. I told her the ruling. She said, "Good. Now, come over. I have tomatoes." I drove to Pomona. I sat in her backyard under the fig tree. She brought out a plate of sliced tomatoes with salt and olive oil. We didn't talk about my mother. We talked about the fig tree, which had produced an unusually large crop that year, and about a book she was recommending to her students, and about a road trip she was planning to take in the fall. It was the most normal 2 hours I had experienced in a very long time. I want to go back to the mediation room because I haven't finished telling you what happened there. After my mother spoke for 14 minutes, it was my turn. I had prepared for this. Patricia Holt, and I had spent 3 sessions preparing for this. She had told me very clearly, do not argue, do not explain yourself, do not respond to her characterizations of your behavior. State facts, use documents, keep your voice level. I had practiced keeping my voice level. I had practiced it in my car, in my apartment, in the shower. I had practiced it until the facts felt like something I was reading from a page rather than something I was living inside. I spoke for 9 minutes. I said the following things in this order. I said that on the 14th of October 2021, I attended an appointment with Dr. Elliot Crane at my mother's request without being informed that the appointment would be used to generate a clinical letter in support of a conservatorship petition. I said that between January of 2017 and November of 2021, I transferred a total of $31,400 to an account jointly held by Carolyn Voss and Marcus Voss in response to 14 separate requests for financial assistance. none of which disclosed the joint nature of the account. I said that in March of 2018, my mother transferred the deed of a property valued at $340,000 to Voss Holdings, LLC, a company solely managed by Marcus Voss, recorded as a gift for estate planning purposes, while simultaneously continuing to request financial assistance from me. I said that I had the bank records, the transfer records, the deed transfer documentation, and the account records to support each of these statements, and that copies had been provided to the mediator. Then I stopped talking. My mother looked at me for a moment. Her expression did not change. She said in her measured, sorrowful tone, I think Renata is very confused about the nature of our family's financial arrangements. I said, the documents speak for themselves. And then I was done. I had nothing else to say to her in that room. I had said what I came to say. I had said it without raising my voice, without crying, without explaining how I felt, or asking her to acknowledge what she had done. I had stated facts. I had cited documents. I had let the silence do the rest. That is the only kind of confrontation worth having with someone who has been building a case against you for 11 years. Not a scene, not a reckoning, a presentation, calm, documented, and complete. There are things I have not told you because they are not mine to tell. There are family members who knew more than they admitted. There are conversations I am aware of that I was not present for. There are things in the brown notebook, specific entries, specific dates, that I have read and then set aside because carrying them serves no purpose. What I have told you is what I can verify, what I can document, what the records show. Here is what the records show. In summary, my mother spent 11 years building a clinical portrait of a troubled daughter. She spent 5 years soliciting money from that daughter under false pretenses. She spent 40 months working with a doctor and a lawyer to file a legal petition that would have given her control of that daughter's finances. She did all of this calmly, methodically, and with excellent documentation. She almost succeeded. She would have succeeded if Sylvia hadn't mentioned the questions in passing, if I hadn't called Deb Ocho, if Deb hadn't said, there is a filing in that flat, efficient voice. If Patricia Holt hadn't known exactly which records to request, she almost succeeded. That is the part I think about most, not the betrayal. I have made a kind of peace with the betrayal, or at least a working arrangement with it. What I think about is the margin, how close it was. How many people don't have a Sylvia or a Deb or a Patricia? How many people sit in a mediator's office without the bank records, without the deed transfer documentation, without the account records, and hear their mother describe them as confused and unstable and have no way to prove otherwise? If you are one of those people, if you are sitting somewhere right now with the specific cold feeling that something is being built around you without your knowledge, please hear me when I say the records exist. Your bank has them. The courthouse has them. The county recorder's office has them. You are allowed to request them. You are allowed to know what has been filed in your name, about your name against your name. You are allowed to know. Subscribe if you want to hear the rest of this. There is more, there is the deposition, there is the settlement negotiation, there is a specific afternoon when I sat across a conference table from my mother and watched her sign a document acknowledging that she had received money from me under false pretenses. I will tell you all of it, but I want to do it carefully, the way it deserves to be told. Because the thing about this kind of story is that the temptation is always to make it bigger than it is, to make it dramatic, to make the villain monstrous and the victim heroic and the ending triumphant. And I understand that temptation. I have felt it. But the truth is smaller than that. And the truth is harder than that. And the truth is what I owe you. The truth is that my mother is not a monster. She is a woman who learned very early in her life that documentation is power, that if you write things down, dated and filed and organized, you can construct a version of reality that is very difficult to argue with. She learned this, I think, from her own mother, who was a woman I never knew well, but who had the same measured, sorrowful tone and the same gift for making other people feel like the problem. The truth is that Marcus is not a monster either. He is a man who was offered a very good deal, a property worth $340,000, a rent free apartment, a monthly income, and the ongoing reassurance that he was the good one. And he took it. Most people would take it. The deal required only one thing, that he agree. When asked that his sister was unstable, that he co-sign the petition, that he sit in the mediation room and look at me with the same practiced, sorrowful expression our mother had taught him. He did those things. He did them calmly and methodically and with excellent documentation. And I am not a hero. I am a 38-year-old woman who kept her bank records, who had a cousin who told the truth, who found a paralegal with a flat voice and a legal pad. I got lucky in the specific way that careful people sometimes get lucky, not because the universe rewarded my virtue, but because the records existed and I knew how to find them. That is the whole story. That is all of it, except for the notebook. I want to end with the notebook because it is the thing I think about most. Not the legal proceedings, not the money, not the settlement. The notebook. After the discovery process, after the legal proceedings concluded, the brown composition notebook was returned to my mother's attorney. It is presumably still in her possession. She may still carry it in her purse. I don't know. I haven't seen her since the mediation, but I think about it. I think about the fact that I saw that notebook 100 times over 11 years and thought it was a prayer journal. I think about the specific comfort I felt as a child and as an adult, seeing my mother reach into her purse and pull out that brown notebook. I thought she was writing down prayers. I thought she was writing down things she was grateful for. I thought the notebook was evidence of her inner life, her faith, her private relationship with something larger than herself. It was evidence of her inner life, just not the inner life I imagined. Here is what I know about the notebook. Now that I didn't know then, the notebook is not a record of my failures. It is a record of her project. Every entry, every dated observation, every clinical note, they are not about me. They are about her. They are about a woman who needed more than anything to be the one who understood what was wrong with the people around her, who needed to be the one with the folder, the label maker, the carefully organized evidence, who needed, above all, to be the one who was not the problem. The notebook is not a record of my instability. It is a record of hers. And that is the thing I could not have understood at 15 when I found the folder in the workshop. That is the thing I could not have understood at 36 when I stood in the parking structure with the warm envelope in my cold hands. That is the thing I understand now at 38, sitting in my apartment in San Bernardino with my bank records, in a folder on my desk and Sylvia's number in my phone and the specific quiet knowledge that I am fine. I was always fine. The notebook was never about me. My mother kept a notebook, a brown cloth covered composition notebook, the kind you buy in a drugstore for $1.49. She carried it in her purse for 11 years. I thought it was a prayer journal. It was just not for me. She was praying in her careful, methodical way for a version of reality in which she was the one who understood everything and I was the one who needed saving. She prayed for it for 11 years. She documented it for 11 years. She built it page by page, entry by entry in her even handwriting with her label maker and her filing cabinet and her gift for systems. And in the end, the notebook saved me. Not because it proved her wrong, the judge's ruling did that, but because it showed me finally and completely who she had always been. Not a mother who was sometimes difficult, sometimes controlling, sometimes unkind. A woman who had been building a case against her own daughter since that daughter was 25 years old. In a brown notebook she carried in her purse, that her daughter saw 100 times and never questioned. I don't carry a notebook. I don't keep a folder labeled behavioral concerns ongoing. I keep my bank records because I am a compliance analyst, and that is what compliance analysts do. I keep my emails, I keep my receipts, and I keep Sylvia's number. And I keep the memory of her voice on the phone saying, I want you to know that I told whoever it was that you were one of the most competent people I'd ever met. That is the only record that matters to me now. Not the settlement documents, not the judge's ruling, not the $31,400. Sylvia's voice saying that she told the truth about me to someone who was trying to build a lie about me before she knew it mattered, just because it was true. That is what I am keeping. That is what I am carrying forward. Everything else, the notebook, the folder, the dinner agenda, the Dr. Crane appointment, the conservatorship petition, the mediation room, the settlement, all of it is filed now, dated, organized, closed. I am fine. I was always fine. Thank you for being here. If this story reached you, if you recognize something in it, if it gave you a name for something you've been living inside, leave a comment. Tell me what you recognized. I'll be reading. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Not because it is dramatic, because it is true. And sometimes the truth is the only thing that cuts through. I'll see you in the next one.